up, YouTube? This is your host, Ranee B, here to spill that homicidal tea. In today's case, we are covering, it's going to take us all the way over to Sandusky County, Ohio. Now, what kind of tea do they spill in those parts? Debauchery and profiling people's asses type of tea. I tell you, I mean, that is for damn sure in this case. My homicidal besties, tell me, what do you think of police closing a case just for closing its sake? Yeah, that's a big trigger for me. Like, I lose it when I hear about that kind of crap. I remember as a kid being introduced to police and them saying, you can trust us and know that we'll never hurt you. Yeah, well, 99.5999%, it's true. There is a special gift that these cops have to protect and serve their communities. But for that 0.4001, I think that's right. I had a chance to check it and I decided not to because I'm a rebel. Anyway, but yeah, those miscreant, villainous pieces of crap have it coming to them. I kind of skidded off into a ditch there. Let's just get back on the case. It's the case of Heather Bogle. And as always, let me remind you to smash that subscribe button, just like karma is going to smash these people in this case. I find myself using the word karma a lot in this part of the video. I like karma though. I mean, I really like karma. I like a good vengeance and reprisal story. I gotta look up what that means psychologically.
Insane.
No, you're insane.
It was Thursday, April 9th, 2015. 28-year-old Heather Bogle, she was having a pretty bad week. You know, it's one of those kind of weeks where you just sucks. It feels like everything can go wrong will, and the world pretty much hates you. And Heather lived with her 5-year-old daughter, McKenzie, in Sandusky County, Ohio, here in the good old US of A. She was in a semi-serious relationship with a woman named Carmela Baudillo for about a year, and she met her at the Whirlpool factory where she worked. And both of them actually worked together. But unfortunately, the writing was on the wall with this relationship, and it started showing signs of wear. They started arguing over really dumb stuff and just basically living as roommates, and roommates that didn't like each other very well. It was not a good environment for Heather's daughter, and Heather knew that. So after a particularly erratic and volatile argument, Heather decided that enough was enough and that she needed to move on. She could see that the relationship was over for good. As it usually happens, it wasn't just raining, it was pouring. And it wasn't just Heather's personal life that was having problems. She had worked extremely hard at nursing school, and she just finished all of her courses and taken her finals. And she discovered that she did not pass one of her really important exams. And during learning this, it's rumored that her less than tactful brother sent her a nasty text calling her too stupid to pass and all that. You know, it just went from crappy day to crappier night, you know? So even though Heather had a job at Whirlpool, which was a decent enough paying gig, she wanted more for her daughter. She wanted to be able to provide whatever she needed and also to be a good role model for her, and by going to school and getting a good job through her education, you know, modeling a strong single woman taking control of her own life. That's why she went to nursing school. But nevertheless, she was still really upset when she discovered she didn't pass those finals. On April 8th, 2015, around 11 p.m., Heather went to work in her overnight shift at Whirlpool and was seen coming out at about 6:15 the next morning, April 9th, 2015, on closed circuit cameras. They caught her exiting around actually 6:17 a.m., and that would be the last time anybody ever saw her alive. Even though Heather was having a rough time, her family knew that she would not leave McKenzie, so she was reported missing pretty quickly. Just one day later, though, her car was found, and it was found at the Somerton Apartments on Hickory Street on April 10th. The parking lot was about a mile away from the Whirlpool factory, and when the car was searched, a harrowing discovery was made. Heather's badly beaten body was found in the trunk of her own car, and police thought that from the condition of Heather's body, that an attack was a personal one, and the killer had known Heather. She had been savagely beaten and shot twice. There were 2 shots in the back, which penetrated vital organs in her chest. There were marks on her wrist from restraints and bruises all over her body. Police believed that she was not shot in the trunk of that car because there was no blood in there and there was no bullet holes. She was placed in the trunk in a semi-fetal position wearing an oversized Mickey Mouse t-shirt. It was several sizes too large for her. There were a lot of defensive wounds on Heather's hands, and it looked like that they were caused from blocking and bringing her hands up to protect herself. Heather's hair had also been hacked off at the scalp. It had been cut off in a jagged manner. Her fingernails had been cut down to the cuticles, like to the skin. Police looked at those closest to Heather to see if they would have wanted her dead, and they were aware that there had been verbal altercations between Heather and Carmela the Wednesday morning that Heather went to work that evening and she went missing. It was understandable that they first wanted to question Carmela, but it became extremely clear extremely quickly that Carmela had nothing to do with Heather's murder. That they were having problems, absolutely, in their relationship, but Carmela did not want Heather dead. Enter Keyona Bor, who lived in the apartment complex where Heather's body and car were found. On the day that Heather went missing, Keyona posted a comment on Facebook, and the comment said stuff about doing time for murder, for pleading guilty to murder, insanity, things like that. They also discovered that a man called Omar Satchel was in her apartment that night. Heather's body was found the same night those two were together, and he had served time on home invasion and firearms charges. Police claim that they had a source that told them that a third person involved was Omar's friend Kayree Jeffrey, that he dumped the murder weapon. Police focused their entire investigation on these people, so much that the people who had been working with Heather that night were not even questioned. The case stalled because of this wild goose chase, and they wanted these suspects, regardless of what the suspect sources came from. See, detective that was leading this investigation, Detective Sean O'Connell, he had not been entirely transparent with his findings. He resigned and faced a disciplinary hearing over accusations over shared confidential documents related to the case. He later pleaded guilty to one felony count of tampering with evidence by omitting the DNA results that excluded these three suspects. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, not long enough. Keyona, Omar, and Kayree were in no way involved in Heather's murder. See, here's the deal. The Facebook post that I was talking about, it was about her baby daddy going to jail for 8 to 10 years for a drug charge. She was posting about how it was garbage that you can get 8 to 10 years for pleading insanity to murder, the same way that you can get 8 to 10 years for being charged with having weed. That was the probable cause. Heather's case, it remained unsolved for 2 years because of this crap. Sheriff Hilton and his team took over the investigation. This time, they didn't focus on any one suspect. They went back to Heather's last known movements. She left the Whirlpool factory at 6:17 a.m. So where did she go after that? And how did she end up in the parking lot where her body was found a day later? In order to find out, they looked at Heather's email accounts and social media activity. Heather's GPS records had been stored by Google, so there was an electronic little crumb trail of coordinates that showed exactly where she went. Did you guys know that about Google? If you have a profile on Google with location enabled, like I have Gmail and I have like 55 accounts, because every time I move, I'll create a Gmail address that has, name, zip code at gmail.com. So I've got quite a few because I'm kind of, a little bit older than most of y'all. Well, I have several of those accounts that are always updating on my Gmail app on my phone. So there's little dots. I can go back years and years and years to like 2015 and see little dots all over the country where I've been. It keeps really running all the time. So if you don't turn it off, it's always finding where you are. They're worried about these vaccines for COVID tracking you. You need to find that little thing in your purse or pocket first, because that phone tracks a lot more than any vaccine could. Don't get me started. Anyway, that morning, the morning of April 9th, Heather left the Whirlpool factory again at 6:17 a.m., just like the camera showed. 13 minutes later, at 6:30 a.m., Google showed a history boink of she was inside a trailer home, which was just a few miles away from the factory. It showed that she was there for around an hour. Police went to the trailer home and they discovered that was one of Heather's co-workers that lived there. He had never even been questioned about Heather's murder. 2 years later. So this is why I can never post that this is safe for audio, because I scream too much, because I get so mad at these things. Anyway, back to the story. Sorry. I mean, like, whenever I'm researching these, I really feel closer to these victims, and it makes me so mad that these police investigations are so bungled. But anyway, it was one of Heather's coworkers named Daniel Myers. Now, they worked the same time every day. Every night they went in, and every morning their shift ended. Daniel told police that he really didn't know Heather, though, and that he only knew of her, and that he didn't know what happened to her and didn't really understand why they were talking to him over 2 years later. That made them really suspicious, as nobody else had refused to provide a sample of DNA, and they asked him for DNA, and he said no. So they got a warrant for his DNA. The DNA from Daniel was compared to the DNA found under Heather's fingernails, the ones that he tried to chop off, and it was a match. Police searched Daniel's trailer, and they hoped to find the murder weapon, but there was no gun or no bullets found. But they did discover that Daniel had bought new floorboards less than a week after Heather's murder. He also bought a new mattress. Good Lord. They believe that Heather was murdered in Daniel's trailer shortly after leaving work that morning. Police believe that Daniel's motive was a sexual one, that they found women's underwear in a safe in his trailer, and they also found a bunch of videos with Daniel with women. Whatever. Daniel was arrested and charged with Heather's murder, and after his arrest, 10 more women came forward and claimed that they had been indecently assaulted by him. Apparently, when a woman says no to his sexual advances, he becomes violent. And then he starts grabbing them and then slamming them against the wall or their head against the ground. Really similar to the kind of damage that was inflicted on Heather. Faced with the possible death penalty, Daniel decided to accept a plea deal. It meant that he would avoid the death penalty and he would never leave prison alive. And it also spared the family a lengthy trial. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 20 years. Yay! Even though I do prefer the needles. But the prosecutor said that he thought it happened immediately as soon as that she came in that door, that he thought that he came onto her sexually, that she probably immediately rejected him because she's a lesbian, so she probably even found it funny that he was trying to hit on her, because she wasn't exactly secretive about the fact that she had a girlfriend at work. So, I mean, like, come on, get real. She might have said something like that. Well, doing so probably enraged him enough to grab her, causing her to punch him in the face, because I know that they found that he had a cracked tooth and another broken tooth that he had repaired with super glue. Heather did not take shit from anyone. If she had to defend herself, she would. But he physically overpowered her, and he beat her into submission. He handcuffed her, he beat her some more, he stripped her, probably had her on that bed, the one that we know that he replaced a month after the homicide. They think that he tortured her for a long time before he shot and killed her. Daniel later told an inmate that he killed her because she laughed at him, just like the prosecution thought. He said that she told him that she failed her exam and he wanted to console her. But when she rejected him, he went nuts. The reality is that Daniel seized this opportunity in the morning to invite Heather to his trailer. He knew her well. He actually worked with her often and at the same factory line. Daniel would often observe her, and he saw that she was really upset that particular morning and really vulnerable. She's going through a lot, and she never saw Daniel in the way that he wanted her to. So when he attacked her, she fought as hard as she could. He later told an inmate that she broke his tooth in the struggle, and he had to get it repaired. Super glue, shitty dentist. And they killed her. And it was Heather's last fight that saved other women from going through the same thing. Even though Daniel cut her fingernails trying to get rid of DNA, police managed to collect some evidence that was later matched. It only takes one cell, y'all. I mean, it takes one cell. Do you know how big one cell? One cell! Anyway, again, why I can't make this a podcast. These idiots think that they can cut away all the cells. They're dumb. Anyway, Daniel thought that he could get away with murder, and in a few years it looked like that he had. But he hadn't tried to hide the fact that he was involved. In fact, he made sure he was noticed. He went to Heather's funeral, signed the book of condolences, even donated $125 to the GoFundMe campaign that was set up for Heather's daughter. His actions were so brazen that it caused people to ask, has he done this before? Well, 6 years before Heather's murder, another Whirlpool employee Must not be much to the dating scene in the city of Clyde, Sandusky County, Ohio. Anyway, 38-year-old Leanne Sluter was found dead. Leanne was Daniel's girlfriend and the mother of a son. Daniel claimed that time that he found Leanne dead in her bed in the house on the 1st of March, 2009. When emergency services arrived, they pronounced her dead on the scene. Her death was ruled a suicide by gunshot wound. The investigation was reopened after Heather's death, and they reached the same conclusion. They were limited to the evidence and photographs that had been gathered and taken at the time. After authorities reopened the investigation, Daniel's relatives gave them a suicide note they found in Daniel's possessions. The note was addressed to Daniel, and that stated that Leanne felt like an empty shell inside, and that Daniel had beat her down and used her for money and kicked her to the side whenever the next best thing came along. The note actually was quoted as saying, "No one really understands how it was for me since I put on such a cheerful face at work. Everyone assumed I was happy, joyful, joy, Leanne. However, all I ever wanted was to die so this pain would stop." Leanne was found with a single gunshot to the chest. A .22 caliber rifle was found beside her. Daniel admitted that he gave her the gun for her own security. But her family didn't believe that she committed suicide because she'd never mentioned anything about that. She never mentioned being depressed like that, never wanting to kill herself. And they didn't even think that she could shoot herself in the chest because it was a long barrel. How did it get next to her body then? But the inquest showed that it was a suicide and it was reclosed after it was opened. When Daniel was sentenced for Heather's murder, the judge gave him the opportunity to say whatever he needed to say to her family in court. Daniel said, "I have nothing to say." It sort of sucks that when I was looking up to see if they ever charged him for Leanne's death at all, that they did actually rule that death as suicide. Because they did, like I said, reopen that case, but closed it when it was a suicide. I mean, what an effect that this one man had on so many people's lives. After Daniel Myers murdered Heather Bogle on April 10th of 2015, a lot of things changed. Her very young daughter had to say goodbye to a mother. A loving daughter, sister, closest friend were all taken from her family. Her friends grieved for months and years, unable to comprehend how such a senseless death could occur and who could have done it. The community was shocked, terrified, frankly quite furious that no progress had been made discovering her perpetrator sooner. After the detective investigating Bogle's murder named each of them as a suspect in her killing of those 3 young African Americans, their lives were forever changed. One of those 3, Keyona Bor, she had lost her job, lost her house. She'd been abused on the internet for years since the incident. There's so many victims for this one piece of shit. Speaking of pieces of shit, Sean O'Connell, the investigator who listed Keyona as a suspect, has now admitted to providing the prosecutor with false evidence against Bor and the others. A decision that resulted in him being fired and sent away to prison. Yay! O'Connell dismissed legitimate information on Daniel Myers, who worked at the same shift in line at Bogle as the Whirlpool plant in Clyde. An informant stated that she was certain that he was capable of such a horrible deed. This was all like days after this event happened. The source told O'Connell that Myers, 49 at the time, had brutalized other women. This investigator never followed up on the information. He'd already had his 3 African Americans. What did he care? Nobody ever contacted Myers and never interrogated any of the other Whirlpool employees. Instead, at his sentencing hearing in September of that year, visiting Judge Patricia Cosgrove said he gave the prosecutors false information against Bor and the others, and he knew they were from people who were lying to him. For fabricating his Bogle case file, Cosgrove sentenced O'Connell to 2 years in prison. But that's not what he had envisioned for his law enforcement career. See, O'Connell, he wanted to be sheriff. He had discussed it openly with his former sheriff, Kyle Overmeyer, who agreed to move aside so O'Connell could take over. And there was enough of misconduct the detective was aware of that could have influenced Overmeyer's decision to decline the offer. When Overmeyer resigned, O'Connell contacted the County Republican Party and requested that he be made sheriff. However, fate intervened, and O'Connell was unable to get this desired position. You see, Overmeyer, he was also shady because he knew what was going on with O'Connell. He was the county narcotics task force chief at the time. He was battling his own opiate addiction. What's going on with Clyde? Oh my gosh, you guys in Sandusky, Ohio, get it together. Overmeyer began stealing medicines from lockboxes at area police stations after his doctors stopped writing him scripts and refused to give him refills. In August of 2015, the county's 6 police chiefs, Fremont Chief James White, Bellevue Chief Mark Kaufman, Gibsonburg Chief Paul Whitaker, Green Springs Chief Chris Horn, Clyde Chief, good Lord, hope he's okay, Bruce Gower, because Clyde's got problems, and Woodsville Chief Roy Whitehead learned that Overmeyer was stealing drugs all across the board, requested an investigation. At least there are a few good cops in this group. But that investigation, it languished and rotted on the vine due to a lack of follow-up. The chiefs became irritated for months after they reported the thefts. No one from the attorney's office did anything. State's Attorney's General Office or the crime lab. Nobody contacted them to obtain any evidence. Reporters from the Register posed questions, and the chiefs agreed to meet and discuss problems. After the newspaper reported on the meetings with the chiefs and their accusations of the Ohio Attorney General's office had dropped the ball, the state's investigations into Overmeyer and the stolen medications was renewed in January 2016. Sandusky's county's 6 police chiefs met with Sandusky Register on Friday afternoon following that to discuss the drug investigation into Kyle Overmeyer. Overmeyer was quickly thrown out of office and confined to a jail cell in December of 2017. He was found guilty of theft and narcotics possession and sentenced to 4 years in jail. Yay! That's not a death penalty case, so I'm cool with the jail time. On Wednesday, February 13th, 2019, Daniel Myers was escorted out of Sandusky County Courthouse in Fremont following his sentence. For the murder of Heather Bogle, he was sentenced to life, like I told you earlier, without the possibility of parole. I mean, how sad can you get? The ripples of this case go so far, and it's all from one man. But at the same time, it's so crazy how the actions of Heather, who put up one hell of a fight, stopped all of this. You know, she gave her life. She gave the ultimate sacrifice to save so many women she didn't even know. That's insane, how many lives are saved by these heroic men and women who lose their lives in these cases. But they leave their forensic evidence for investigators to nail down and follow up these pathetic pieces of shit who honestly believe that they can get away with it. And to Keyona, oh my gosh, who seemed to have taken it harder than the other 2 innocent African Americans brought to this case. Girl, I hope time has filled in some of these holes and the world accepts you now, that you were just someone in the system that they tried to use you as a pawn. But as a young, strong woman, you did not take it lying down, and you fought against a corrupt police force who ultimately got brought to justice. Bless all y'all. All of y'all. You know, like I'm a pope or something. Kiss the ring. That's it for the case of Heather Bogle. I apologize so much for my voice. I am sicker than crap, but here's a video anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And have you ever heard of this one? I hadn't heard of it before, but it's not that popular. But I think it should be. I mean, it's a great story that reminds us that the ones who are sent to protect us sometimes do anything but. And I hate the corruption in the police force. And I want to go back to a time where I saw a uniform and got excited and wanted to talk to the police, like when I was a kid. But I'll keep my distance now. Until next time, I know you have it in you not to murder anyone, to be a topic on this channel. You true crime junkies are way too smart to do that anyway. I'll see y'all later. Bye!